everyone, Joshua Hanlon here at the Brickmania headquarters in Minneapolis, and today we're going to be taking a look at some of the behind the scenes of how Brickmania kits are designed. So we'll have a few different designers taking us through their process. So I've got the first one right next to me here. If you want to introduce yourself and then tell us what we have going on here.
All right, I will. My name is Andrew Summers. I am an import from California. I've known Dan for a little while from conventions and whatnot. And the opportunity to work at Brickmania came about, so I figured I might as well do it. What you see before you here is me working on a turretless tank. It's a Jagdpanther, German World War II, late war tank destroyer. And basically the process starts off with finding reference images. You know, as a lot of LEGO projects do, you find reference images for it. Specifically what we're looking for are blueprints. So I got some right here for you. You basically get every side, every angle of the tank. Now, we build everything at 1/35th scale, so everything is uniform. And to do that, you have to find reference images online and then appropriately scale them down in an editing program. And from there, you can then start building. So the goal is to try to match the dimensions as best as you can. Now, obviously, that's rather difficult with LEGO, especially when you're working with something such as a tank, where there's a lot of angles. So you have to interpret shapes. You got to figure out, okay, what can I use to get the angle that I like or that I need to get here? What do I want the rear to look like? And you do a lot of that. You look on the internet, you look back at your blueprint, you're constantly making comparisons.
You know, a lot of these vehicles would have different versions of them built during the war and that sort of thing, or have slight variations throughout, say, the Second World War here. So are you trying to find sort of specific versions of this, or making sure that you stick with kind of one particular type of the vehicle that you're working on?
It sort of varies, because in field, a lot of military vehicles, and this is just true, you know, throughout time, they add on a lot of stuff. You know, they'll add on a lot of stuff. They'll take away some design features. We tend to get like what was mass produced, the one that you would most likely see. Or at least that's what I try to do when I'm building these things. I don't want to get something that's, it's a very niche vehicle. Like, okay, this one has, I don't know, a certain antenna. These ones. Basically, you just try to find one that was of a certain area or era in time, what was out, what was available, what was on the field.
I know you had the photos put up here online. Are there other places you kind of do that research or work with different people to kind of get the best source material?
A lot of it is just Google Images. I mean, we do have some sites every now and then. I think it's Military Encyclopedia or something. That's a very good website. I think I have it actually here. Tanksencyclopedia.com. Very good resource for World War II, World War I, tanks throughout time. And of course, good old Google Images. Dan even has some textbooks you could look through. So if you really want to get precise or learn more about the vehicles and what they do, what their roles were, then you can look at those books as well. Once we have a physical prototype, that's the first step. So you want to do the physical prototype, you want to get that all done so you can say, hey, look, I have something, it doesn't fall apart. All right. Then after that, the process switches to the digital aspect of it. So we use a program here, Bricksmith or L-Draw, and you can see, let's see, I've done another model here. This is the Stridswagen 103. So you take your prototype in physical bricks, and then you take it apart, which brings a tear to my eye, because then I realize I got to build this thing all over again. Actually, no, I love it. But you build it digitally. So then you have it online, well, not online, but you have it in the computer system, and then you can easily bring it up if you need to make any changes to the file. But once you do that, and you have it in Bricksmith here, you then make the instructions off of it. So from Bricksmith, it then goes to LPub, which is an instruction generator, and you can basically lay out how you want it to look. So if I take this file, I throw it into L-Draw here, I can say, okay, I want to group these two parts as a step, or I want to create a submodel. So I want to take a chunk of that and then create that and throw it into the instructions. So it goes from physical build, physical prototype, to digital drawing once your prototype is all done and approved. Digital drawing, and then you go to the instruction creation phase. And then following L-Draw, you export that all into Adobe Acrobat, and that's where you can make your sort of, I don't want to say final changes, but you can fine-tune it. So you can say, okay, I want these many steps on one page, or I need to move this over to here, I need to resize this image, you know, etc. So it's, you do the physical prototype up front, and then you have a lot of computer work after that.
Using this model right here as an example, how long does this process typically take you from like start to finish on a design?
So usually you're given like a week and a half for the prototype, which that's a sufficient amount of time. And then from there, you have another week or so to do the instructions, the digital instruction, build it digitally, and then another little bit of time to do the actual instructions. And then there's a lot of fine tuning behind the scenes as well. And it doesn't all fall on the designer to do it. Once you have the instructions, a draft of instructions, you think, okay, this is good. We send it off to someone else in the company, Eric. He looks at it and says, okay, is this easy to follow along with? Is this, can someone who has never picked up Lego before pick it up, read through the instructions, and easily assemble it? And he'll give you his comments, and then based on those comments, you retool what you've done. We want everyone to enjoy these kits. And if you have a design that's too complex or instructions that are too complex, the person's not going to be happy.
So you get kind of that sort of outside feedback or other people looking at it and just making sure that the whole process kind of works out in the end to make a model that people can actually build.
Right. And we always pride ourselves in making things as, when it comes to the build, making the build as sturdy as possible. When it comes to instructions, making them as readable as possible. So accessibility. Actually, behind you there, we have a large set of these black drawers that we pull out, and that has all these parts in it. They're in little cases, actually on the table. So he's filming right there. There's a lot of these jewelry organizer bins, and that has all the parts we need. So if you're working on something at your desk, you can either bring over the parts here, you can hoard them, as I've done in the past, which I'm trying not to do. But yeah, you just get up out of your chair, walk over there and say, okay, I need 1x2 slope, dig through the bins, the colors, and find it. And then you just keep up the process. It's nice having such a large parts library on hand because that makes things a lot easier. And the fact that it's, for the most part, organized, that just expedites the building process rather than rustling through various Lego, which I've done in the past, and that's not fun. I'm sure everyone out there can attest to that. That is not fun.
Well, great work. I look forward to seeing the model finished here. Thank you so much for the insight. We'll move over to the next bay and keep looking at the process here. So if you want to introduce yourself and tell us what we have going on here.
All right, I'm Cody O'Sell. I'm the design team manager at Brickmania, and currently I'm working on the next step process. I think you just talked to Andrew about how he starts developing a prototype, and now I'm doing the next step, which is creating a parts list that we can send to our production facility. So that really just comes down to re-engineering the prototype that was developed initially into Bricksmith. So step by step, it's basically the first initial phase of creating instructions of a readable PDF. So it's basically a CAD modeling system, has all a parts library. Sometimes we modify parts ourselves. We include the printed parts on there, and other non-Lego elements that we use, like brick arms per se. So we can model those in here and put them in our instructions as well. Typically, I start out with what I find to be the main section of a model.
Okay.
And then step by step, just keep clicking it on and adding submodels. I'm currently working on a SB-2C Helldiver, World War II Navy airplane. And it's big, it's dark blue. It's one of the most difficult colors to build in, at least for having a mass-produced kit. Dark blue is difficult. Sand blue is also difficult. Thanks to a lot of current Lego sets coming out, there's more dark blue, more sand blue available now. And then, of course, a white bottom. That's a very iconic feature of a lot of Navy planes during World War II, usually a three-tone color scheme. So it's currently what I'm working on right now.
Yeah, it looks like it's coming along nicely here. And so I know you've, in your time at Brickmania, worked on some really, really massive kits as well, some of the stuff you've designed. So is that process very different than some of the smaller stuff, or does that change at all as you kind of scale the build up?
Yeah, the process is different depending. I think there's a cutoff point that I guess I kind of developed on my own was with some of the larger sets. Now I split it up more to like how you see Lego doing theirs and numbering their bags. initially I started that, I think with the B-17, maybe a couple kits prior, because that was it's over a 3,000 part kit. And dumping 3,000 parts out on the table is not enjoyable. Trying to search through, especially when it's all like one color, maybe two colors.
Here's a massive mountain of gray pieces. What am I doing?
Right, exactly. So I tried to split up into sections. I had the cockpit, I had a wing, and B-17 wing is 2 feet long, 1/35th scale. So I think I split it up into 5 bags. Something like this, I probably won't split it up into bag numbers. It's small enough. I mean, maybe I will. It's based on how I'm currently building it. I'm doing the nose, the middle of the wing, and the tail section. So I could split those up into bags maybe if I wanted to. Might make it a little easier. I guess I'll decide that at the end. It's not too much of a change now just to separate sections out. So it's a really friendly program in that sense where you're basically just building it. It's just virtual.
Yeah. Before you started working here at Brickmania, did you have kind of a design background at all, or is this something you kind of learned a lot on the job as you've gone along?
I went to a trade school right out of high school for machine tool technology, so I learned how to run CNC machines and learned some of their CAD modeling software. So this is a much simplified version of the CAD modeling software, but a lot of the principles, same tools apply. So it's just kind of like a duck to water for me in this process. But no, other than that, I haven't had any experience other than just building physical models at home, in my bedroom.
So if you can maybe talk a little bit more about kind of the challenges of working with Lego digitally versus physically, or pros and cons of that situation, or kind of how you approach that and handle that when you have just the digital pieces versus the physical ones in front of you.
Well, it certainly is a lot nicer building a physical prototype rather than starting off with the CAD program, because we like to build off of blueprints. Like Andrew was touching on, where you have the scale blueprints and then you build physically off of that, is a heck of a lot easier than trying to guesstimate when you have no frame of reference inside the computer. So I get a prototype as close as I can to what colors I want to use, and then typically I tear apart section by section and then reference on Bricklink what parts are available, what color's cheaper, what color, availability and color. Especially when it's something inside, internal, I change those colors a lot if it's cheaper or more acquirable, because you don't see it anyways. It doesn't really matter, on the inside of the wing what color the plates are. So as you can see here, I have this 4x10 dark bluish gray plate. I've switched out here for dark tan because it's a lot cheaper, easier to acquire. No one's going to see it. So there's a lot of that going around. But for instance, the sand blue, as I mentioned earlier, is a hard color to come by in large quantities, and some of the parts you might think would be available aren't. Plates, for example. This is about the only plate I can use that's sand blue that's available. It's just a bunch of 1x4 plates. But it's going to have a really nice effect on the airplane once it's done. But so there's pros and cons to using physical versus digital, but they complement each other really well, especially designing a kit that you're going to be mass producing. Great frame of reference.
Yeah. So do you keep an eye on official Lego kits at all for like new parts or new colors and that sort of thing? It's like, oh, that's a piece I'll really be able to use in some kind of future tank or plane or something like that.
I do. I've also followed New Elementary on
fantastic website.
Yeah, they're really good at showing a new part, new color, new part type. So I follow them a lot. Also, I do keep an eye on, at least when Bricklink has a new kit coming out, or I follow Lego on social media and see what new kits are coming out, kind of inspect those part colors. But yeah, definitely New Elementary. They're great. I try to keep tabs on them. They show a lot of good things, and then I relay that information around the office, like, hey, this part comes in a new color. So especially we get really excited when something new comes in dark bluish gray, because that's pretty much all we build in mostly is dark bluish gray. So yeah, definitely try to keep an eye on that.
That works well. Well, thank you for giving us some more background into the process here. I hope the model turns out well for you. It looks great so far, so appreciate it. Thank you. And then we'll come around the corner here. And so if you want to introduce yourself and what are you working on?
Hi, I'm Slam. Do I need a real name? No, you can call me Slam. Everybody calls me Slam.
Good enough.
Fine. I'm one of the graphic designers here, and I do a lot of the art on UV printing. So I do all of the perfect caliber weapons, and I do all of the instruction, layout, and pre-pressing. I do all the box covers. I do most of the photography here. Yeah. Okay.
So a lot of different, a lot of different things you're working on here. Then, so talk about kind of your relationship with the guys we talked to earlier in terms of how that process works and kind of where you come in there.
So after somebody like Cody or Andrew or John, they finish a kit and they have their instruction steps and they've been through their first testings. I get those instructions and I start laying out the instruction book. So, and all of our books have like an extra page with extra information that we have somebody writing for. I go find appropriate photos to go on that page, and then take our graphic elements that we've rendered and put those in the front. It's all assembly. That's the assembly line work of being a graphic designer, is making sure the book has everything it needs. I also do all the sticker art for Brickmania, and once I've laid out stickers, had those printed and cut, we need instructions for how those go onto the kit, so I lay out those instructions. Yeah. I do a lot of things here. Lots of the nuts and bolts things that after we've got a kit, but we want to make it into something sellable, we need all the paper that goes with it. The Jagdpanzer 38 Hetzer instructions up here. So about to put the cover together on that instruction book. And boy, I don't even know.
So this is what a typical kind of program will look like for you in terms of layout and kind of how your process works when designing.
Correct. I'm in InDesign right now. We use the Adobe Suite extensively, so InDesign is essentially a book layout tool. So I've taken all the instructions and spread it page by page through the book and gotten sticker placements that I did in Illustrator. Just zoomed way too far in. So sticker placement instructions are on that last page there, and this is coming together. It should be done in an hour or so and can go to the printer. So that's pretty exciting. I spent a lot of time in Photoshop with all the photography work and a lot of the rendered graphics. So getting those things ready for the web and for instructions and covers and propaganda, things like that. And then occasionally I get to do really fun things too. Like this is a recent piece of art that came out in John Canepa's bunker. So that's kind of a cool little piece, and works as a poster, also worked at a 2x4 tile. Really nicely as a 2x4 propaganda tile. So occasionally I get to do fun artistic stuff like that.
Yeah. That's the kind of detail that can really, like on a tile, like you were saying, make a build pop, or kind of give that sort of realistic detail to it.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. And there's other examples of that too, like, I don't know, this olives label went on to a one by one cylinder, so, or 1x1 brick. 1x1 brick, yeah. But the artwork's at full size, and it also works really nice and tiny, right? I really enjoyed doing that olives label. So that needs to be photographed next. I have to go find appropriate weaponry for him. Earlier this morning, I made his packaging card, so the paper that goes with his package, and he should be ready to go on sale that end of the week. If you walk into one of our stores and look at the wall, I've worked on everything you see, right? It all goes through me. Yeah.
So what are maybe some of the challenges of that job that people wouldn't normally think of, or kind of behind the scenes as that process goes along that you find are kind of things you have to overcome or figure ways to accomplish it as your kind of daily tasks?
No, it's all easy. No. Designing for things that are super tiny, especially when it comes to things like the perfect calibers. This is not a very large object, and my screen is quite large. So there's just a disconnect when you've been staring at, say, I think I have that weapon up. So I've been staring at this thing that appears to be 8 inches across, and I can just get lost in the weeds, and just realize I've been designing something that's going to be a couple of microns across, and maybe I should just not work on anything that tiny. Landon likes to call that getting really into the rhinoceros hairs of an object. So, and some of that detail will really come across even if it is included, like it turns it into an amazing object, and some of it's just lost and it turns to mush. So that's one of the biggest challenges working at a small scale for me, and with practice it's getting better. But as far as the day-to-day stuff, like I said, a lot of it's assembly line. The photography is super challenging because you want to make everything just be the most amazing thing ever, but you don't want to spend, I don't have a week to spend on one really good photo, which would involve like building entirely new terrain pieces. We have a lot of pre-built terrain, and I can reassemble it and scatter about differently, so we have different shots for most things. But yeah, that's some challenging things too. It's just like everything should be the same, except it shouldn't be the same, right? And everything should be super special, but not super special. So trying to find a good balance of how much effort to put into something is challenging. But
yeah, you definitely have to find that balance. So have you done a lot of like graphic design work and that sort of thing outside of Lego before you kind of worked for Brickmania?
Yeah, I'm older. I've been living in the world of Adobe and graphic design for 20, 30 years. I used to work for a big tech company before coming here. Took a fairly big pay cut to come work at Brickmania, but some jobs are kind of worth it, right? Yeah. You know, I absolutely love every day here, and even the most stressful days are just like the best days of work of my career, right? Because it's really not that stressful. Every day I'm working with toys, and it's super rewarding. And my coworkers are pretty darn awesome. Like these designers are super talented, and if I can surround myself with talented people, I'm a pretty happy camper. So, yeah.
Well, fantastic work. I'm glad to hear that. Then, thank you so much for giving us the behind the scenes on the process there.
Okay, thanks. I feel like I've kind of been through a job interview, and so hopefully I get this job. No, cool.
Don't worry, you're secure here.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, talk to you again soon.
Yep. So we'll move down then. I think we have one more designer we're going to chat with here, and that'll finish out kind of our whole look behind the scenes. So if you want to introduce yourself quickly and then take us through what you're working on.
Sure. My name is John Canepa, and I am a designer and other things here at Brickmania. Of course, we all wear many hats. What I'm working on right now is the ISU 122. It's a Russian heavy artillery piece, or mobile artillery. I've just finished the sort of building it in the computer phase. Slam was just talking about what he does. This is what we give him as kind of a reference sheet of sort of what direction we want to go in as far as, what numbers on the side and what icons and what the tanker should look like and that sort of thing. So this is what is a basic plan for what, it should have as far as printing and stickers and things like that goes. Some reference pictures, and that's of course for him to just get started. And of course he does all his own research and reference, searches and so forth. So takes it to where you've seen some of his work is amazing. So after that, of course, I go into the laying out the instructions phase. We use different sorts of programs for that. It's just basically this is a preliminary where we're just sort of like seeing how things look on the page and going through the different instructions to see, make sure it's not going off the page, makes sense, goes in order and that kind of thing. So it's kind of a preliminary before we get into the actual instructions themselves, which is done in Acrobat, which likes to crash all the time. So we do a lot of saving when we get to that phase. But basically, right now, this wouldn't be final. We would have a nice, border on here. Things would be tucked in a little bit better, a little bit laid out, a little bit nicer looking. So it makes, like I said, it makes sense. Customer can understand the easy to assemble instructions. So they have a really good experience when they build our kits. That's very, very important to us. So.
So you're kind of sitting here looking at each page and the way pieces connect and everything and the way it's laid out and just wondering, as the average user, how would they approach this?
Exactly. Making sure that nothing's hidden. So if someone sees a part, they know exactly where it goes. A lot of these kits, we've done very similar things. Dan has built, very similar tanks. Yeah. So in this case, if you look at the suspension on here, which has got a real nice suspension, this is all Dan's design. So I started there. Why reinvent the wheel when he's got a really nice suspension? I actually did launch this off of a table about 10 inches high. A few things did fall off, but more or less it stayed intact. It's a really sturdy construction. when you get, especially when you get into the different track links that we use. So you can really abuse this tank, and it'll still be okay, right? You can still go back into battle. So this is a very large tank for the Russian army. You can see over here the ones from before. That's the that is the T-3476, the smaller one, and then we got the T-3485, which is just a brand new tank that we've just releasing. Doesn't have all its stickers on yet. And of course, this is like the next level up for the Russian army to further terrorize their enemies, right? Big beefy tank, tons of extra fuel on board. Really, I'm gone hatch crazy on this one. You've got all sorts of different hatches that you can open up. 3 guys can sit on top. You can, of course, you have an engine compartment there, which you can already. We tend to give the customer an ability to actually add some of their own creation into our kits. So we leave the engine compartment open, the interior sort of like blank, so they can actually add their, sensibilities to it and add more fun for them to, add their own customization. So yeah, that's the Russian ISU-122, very big gun, very big bada boom, as they say in the industry. It's a big boomer, right? All my big boom analogies. Anyway, so we build the kit again. We build it in the computer in 3D, and then we have to make the instructions very pretty and very understandable for the customer. So that's what, that's a basic layout, and then we'll get rid of these lines here, scrunch it a little bit, spread it out a little bit so it looks really nice looking on the page, not crowded, and the customer can easily understand what they need to do to build the kit. Again, we want the customer to have a very, very good experience. And, I think customers, they don't, what I was going to say is they appreciate it. They appreciate that we go through this effort, not 100%. We haven't got to 100%, customers going, yippee! But that's what we're striving for. Yeah. So it's all you can do, right?
As you're working on one of these kits, maybe like this one, you were rolling it around and everything, how do you decide sort of playability versus just kind of designing it as a model on display? And is there a balance there when you guys are working on these kits?
Yeah, we do want it to stay together when someone plays with it. I mean, some kits are more sturdy than others just because the larger you get, the more sort of support you can put into it. If you get into smaller scale things, kits, then, nothing is ever going to be so fragile you can't touch it. But we do have to balance between the functionality, sturdiness of it, and then what it's supposed to look like. So, we get here, I'll just open my secret drawer of knowledge here. We start with probably, Cody has them, or somebody had these laid out on their desk. This is what we start with. We start with basic blueprints for the kit. So we're trying to get as many features as possible into our design, but it's not always possible. You have to, and excuse the expression, maybe I shouldn't say this, but this is something I learned from my animation teacher. He used the expression, you have to kill your babies. And what that means is not actually killing babies, but you have all these things that you want to incorporate into a kit, but not every single one is going to actually be sort of, achievable. Mm-hmm. So you have to pick and choose what's important. You try to guess what's going to be important to the customer. We know that they want a kit that's not going to fall apart. So we spend a lot of time making it sturdy. So that's sort of top of the list. And then, okay, we want to have the rollers. We want to have a nice suspension in there. We want to have all the hatches. So this kit will come with one Russian commander. And it actually looks very similar to, in fact, it is. Let's just, come on, let's go over here. Ah! And he's jumping over into the tank. So he'll come with this guy, but let's say you want to make a couple other commanders. Well, now they have the ability to stick the crewmen in here, have one guy working on the engine, whatever. So try to give it sturdiness, but definitely a high level of playability, right? So they can actually, put this in their mock, and maybe they're going to do like me and kind of run it over things and see if it'll stay together. Oops, I knocked something off. We don't know who's going to get this in their hands. Anywhere from a person my age to a younger kid who's just going to want to run over all the German tanks that he can find. So So yeah, we want to make it fun for the customer. So
Yeah, you try to meet every kind of play and build style there as you go along.
as best we can. You know, it's not always going to be what somebody might say. Oh, why didn't you do this or why didn't you do that? We won't be able to please everyone, but we do spend a lot of time again looking at these blueprints, making sure we have the lengths right. So it's as historically accurate as we can get it. Working within the realm of Lego parts, you know, they can be rather thick, so I can't put a thin piece of armor where no part like that exists. So we do the best we can.
Yeah, exactly. So does it ever happen? Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just saying we get very few complaints. Let's put it that way. So I think we're doing the right thing. So, anyways, you were saying? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I interrupted.
So there are enough kind of checks and balances in place. That's kind of what I was going to ask about. Does it ever happen that you'll get to the end of the whole process and maybe send the kits out and it's just something, it just doesn't work for the end user? Or are there enough kind of checks and balances in place in the design process?
Yeah, well, we do the best we can. I mean, we will. We're not error-proof, so things will happen. But our number one concern is that, again, the customer has a really good experience. So if there is something wrong, we do our best to sort of make it right. So, it's to achieve 100% perfection. I don't know. That's too much stress, right?
It's kind of a goal. It's just something you strive for.
It's a goal. It's a lot of responsibility. So again, we do the best we can with the kits. We do actually have reviews. So for example, I'll build this, but then I'll go to the design staff. We'll get together and have them sort of like open the hatches and make sure it's, strong enough. And I didn't forget to put something on there that they think should be included. So we all do checks and balances on each other. So just to make sure that when it gets into our production, which I think you've been around the whole entire headquarters here, that they're not going to have problems. We're not going to slow them down because we didn't do our job correctly. So yeah, there's checks all along the way, and again, we do the best we can to keep errors from happening. But we're only human. We're not machines building tanks. We are human beings and do the best we can.
That's true. Well, I think the model's looking really fantastic. So thank you so much for giving us some more insight to your design process. So now we're sitting here at Dan's desk, and he's going to tell us a little more about kind of how they choose which kits to create here at Brickmania and how that process works. So what do we have here?
Well, actually, we're sitting in front of my desk, and I have pulled up a project list that all of every one of our team member has access to. And basically, we scroll through the whole year showing. We'll go ahead and probably make this several months ahead of time, like what our future releases are going to be. And so, like, let's just say we're going to pick this particular release day. We have the C-47 Skytrain coming out. And it shows you what day we're going to start it. The production will start what day. We have to have a deadline. Where it's going to, the release date, Brickmania, all the internal Brickmania stuff, 100 copies made, and that's the retail price. So we basically go forward about sometimes as much as a year out going, what's important dates, what are important anniversaries, we want to have these things released on it. So the C-47 was instrumental in D-Day, so we decided we're going to put it out right before D-Day, and that would allow us, that and all the things that followed up that month, all the new releases, Normandy Bunker, if you look down lower, scroll through, Universal Carrier, these are all things that are related to D-Day. We decided that a year ago that we were going to do on the 75th anniversary of D-Day, do a whole bunch of D-Day related models, minifigures. And this project list actually shows a bunch of different things. It's showing all these solid red, solid blue, those are new figures. The orange is we have different, they're color coded by our production lines. Red means kits, blue means printing and minifigures. Orange means it's a custom printed parts. This light blue, aqua blue is sort of like paper printing. And then these sort of faded colors are restocks of those same lines. So there'll be like a toned down version. It's like, oh, we've already done it before. It's not so urgent. We've already developed all the assets that go with them. But we figure this stuff out 6 months, sometimes a year or more out. We'll fill in key dates, and then the dates that we don't have something to go with become like, oh, these are bonus dates. We have, and there's certain things that we do once a month. We put out a new main battle tank. We've just decided that was a 2019 theme that we're going to continue. So the third release day of every month, which is typically a Monday, is dedicated to main battle tanks. So they're kind of off theme. So if we're doing 1 month, we're doing all D-Day related stuff, we're still going to throw in our main battle tank because people are expecting that theme to continue throughout the year. Generally speaking, we go with historical data to generate what we're going to do. Like, so upcoming later in June this month, there's going to be the anniversary of the start of the Korean War. So we've launched at least 1 week on that week. We've done some sets that were appropriate for the beginning of the Korean War. And that way we could have a reference point in history, say, hey, 50 years ago today or 60 years ago today, this happened, and we can talk about it. And I believe that in that case will be 70 years ago the Korean War started. So we typically look at anniversaries, look at things that we're going to be celebrating, what's going to be in the news, and say this is what is relevant to that date. Fortunately, we've been able to plan out ahead of time, because we're history buffs. We know what's going on. We had some space race releases that came out on the anniversary dates of the events, and we typically try to do things like that.
Yeah. So is this just you kind of putting this together as like a plan of action for everyone in the office, or is this kind of group meetings, kind of deciding what you're going to do?
It's a little bit of everything. The design team, we're all history buffs, so we have an idea of what we want to do for a particular theme. Like, what are ideas, and we try to match those themes and the ideas that people throw out with appropriate release dates. Sometimes we have to sit on things, but you'll have a person who, I really want to make this, I really want to make this, and we'll have to sit on it until it's an appropriate time. And even nowadays we're sitting on stuff until we get the appropriate licenses. So there's things that we would like to make versus things that we can make, and we have to be respectful of property rights too. So, which is something when we were smaller we didn't really think about, and now that we're bigger and we want to get our stuff more widely circulated, we have to think that we have permission, or we have to have permission to do the things that we want to do. And sometimes that process takes longer, so we're thinking further out. What do we want a year from now? What do we want 2 years from now? We have to actually start contacting people now, because the process is not as quick as we can just design a model, get it out. We actually have to do sort of legal hoops to clear. And it's something with a growing company, we've had to learn that this is a new reality, that we're so big that we need to plan further out. So my sympathy, I used to be very like, oh, Lego takes forever to do things. Now I understand why, because it's not as simple as like flipping on a light switch. We actually have to plan ahead, and there's other considerations besides just parts and building. Yeah.
So what is the whole timeline there then? Once you've decided, okay, we're going to make this kit and we want to release it, how long will that whole thing take then before it's all set to be released typically?
We can release something in as little as 24 hours. Okay. We typically don't. Our kind of more relaxed release schedule would be about 5 weeks from the time that the model's designed, fully designed, to production. And designing a model could take 24 hours. It could take a few minutes, or it could take 2 weeks, depending on how elaborate the model is and how thorough we want to be with product testing before it goes out. So when we're building something that's just sort of a remake or a modification of a previous model, they usually don't take very long. But when you're building something from scratch, it could really take a long time, especially a really big model.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, thank you for that further insight into how you guys come up with kits and everything here. It's good to know that you're really thinking this out, and you're trying to keep best practice in mind in terms of here's kind of a commemorative event, that sort of thing, and try to give people the best product possible each time throughout the year.
Right. So we're the process itself, it may only take a few weeks to make a kit, but we are planning some of the stuff a year or more ahead of time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, thank you so much, Dan, and I hope once again everyone enjoyed getting that insight into the Brickmania design process.